And I realized, wait a minute, I've been doing exactly what I want to do and just always asking him to bless it. I've never said, what do you want me to do? Or do you want me to do something different than I'm doing? Or why did you knit me together inside of my mother's womb? I want to know. I'd never done that. And finally, through just some circumstances that really just sobered me up, I just said, God, I'm sorry. I've wasted 32 years of my life, and I'm sorry for that. But from now on, I want you to be in total control. I will do anything you ask of me, but I'm asking that you'll make it very clear so I don't confuse myself. And I meant that when I said that. You need to mean that when you say it. That's easy to say, oh, yeah, I gave my life to the Lord. But very few, the longer I live and the more I see what's going on around me, I realize it's not very many, unfortunately, that really have just made him the boss. So I did that, and things started to change so quickly. One, my desire for God's word just exploded. I started reading the Bible hours a day and praying, and just, it was totally different. It's like had just gotten saved then, but I was like, no, I'm in. You know what to do. You have a plan. What's your plan? I want to know what your plan is. And so he just started changing me. So for several years, I was in the restaurant business at the time. He didn't change what I was doing or anything. But while I was there, while I was reading the Bible, while I was praying, while I was just really seeking to do what he wanted me to do, he started changing my heart. And he started turning my heart toward my family. And I started to realize, wait, this is my ministry. This is what needs to be the focus of my life. This is the next generation. And he started to make me go, I want to be a Christian like I should be. I want to be a husband, a father. I want my family to, the best I can, make it the way God intended it to be. I want to do it his way. And he just started changing these things. And it was so many unique circumstances in there. But one night, it's been about 2 years since I just started praying, God, I feel like you want me to come home to my family, but I don't know what I would do. But I had a desire to come home, to spend more time with my children, to try to invest more there in that ministry that he had given me. And one night I was working at the restaurant, and a man came in and asked to talk to the owner. And so they got me, and I came out, and I said, yes, sir, how can I help you? And he said, will you sell me this place? And it wasn't for sale or anything. And I said, oh, do you want to be in the restaurant business? And he said, no, I'm going to put my office in here. And I said, what? It was a beautiful location. It was in Boise, Idaho. That's where we lived at the time. And it was on the second story of a building that overlooked the Capitol Dome. So it was a beautiful place. And he was going to rip all the restaurant stuff out of there and just put his office there. But right as he was talking to me, I started to realize, God, you're letting me out of this, aren't you? And he's like, yep, it's time to come home. And things went really quickly. In about 6 weeks, I sold it to him. And I came home, but I didn't know what I was going to do. But I want to tell you, encourage you in this point. When God asks you to do something, he does know the plan. So you just obey. You trust and obey because he's the boss. He is the creator. He knows the end and the beginning at the same time. And so I knew he has a plan. He wouldn't have called me home if he didn't have something for me to do. So for several months, I just played with the kids. I'd been working really hard for about 15 years, and the restaurant business is very demanding. And it was so wonderful to be home, and I just enjoyed that so much. And slowly, different things. He just, again, once I gave him control, he started just directing my path in so many different ways. Because I would submit, and I go, what do you want me to do about this? What do you want me to do about that? What do you want me to do? And so I wouldn't make the decision. I'd say, you make the decision. Just let me know what it is. And one of the things, I'd been working restaurants for 15 years, which is the evening thing. And I realized a lot of us are really good about complaining about those who represent us in the political world and stuff, but we don't do much to make a difference in that. And he started to convict me of that. And I thought, I should go to the Canyon County Republican meetings. It was one day a month for an hour. I go, I can do an hour a month. And my whole point in going, I had no interest in being in politics, but I thought, if I go there and I'll bring the kids so they can see how the world works and this is the way the political system is, if I'm there and someone says something good, I can stand up and say, I totally agree with that. That was a great point. I think we ought to do that. Or if someone stood up and said something that was not a good idea, I could stand up and say, here's one man that doesn't agree with that, and for these reasons. So I just wanted to be a light of truth for biblical principles in the political world. That's the only reason I went. But God always has a plan. When he's directing your path, like he promises to if you're giving it to him, he had a different plan in that. And so it was only 11 months after I went to that first meeting that the representative in our district who had just been elected, he had to step down for health reasons. And I remember we saw it in the paper, and I told my wife, I sure hope we get a decent person representing us this time. He was a Republican, but he's pro-choice, and he's just no good at all. And she said, you ought to do it. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And I really didn't want to do that. I was like, no, I don't have any interest in that. But I learned I'm not the boss. And I started praying, God, is there any way you want me to try to do that? I don't want to, but if you want me to, then I do want to. And I started to be convicted. I need to try for that. I knew there wasn't a chance in the world I'd get it because it's a good old boys club. But I went and found out, how do you do that? How do you be considered? And I went through the process. There was 8 people trying to get that representative position. They asked us questions. They grilled us in different things. And then they sent a list of 3 names to the governor in an order. Here's our first choice, here's our second choice, and here's our third choice. I was the third choice, so I just barely made the list. But we had a Republican governor too. And so this was a Republican committee that had got him elected, and they said, here's our first choice. And he always picked the first choice. But 14 days went by and he hadn't picked yet. He had 14 days to decide who he was going to pick on the list. And one morning I went in, the phone rang, and I went and picked it up. And he said, this is Governor Otter. Is this Curtis? And I said, yes, sir. He said, I want you to be the new representative for your district. And so I was like, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. And I got thrown right into that world. That was not my plans at all. It wasn't even on my checklist. But God has a different checklist than you have. And I'll tell you this, as I look back over my life so far, it's a way better checklist than yours. I'd just be making money and wasting my life like I had been for 32 years if I hadn't said, no, I'm in. I'm in. You've got a purpose in things, and I want to know what it is. And so, I'm a representative. Well, we'd only lived in the district that I got appointed to for 2 years, so we didn't know anybody. So I said, I'll start writing a monthly letter to the editor in the papers. Yeah, we'll feature that. We're happy to, since you're a representative. And I just wrote on different topics, what my beliefs were in economics or in family or in, pro-life or different things. I just wrote so the people would know who was representing them since I was appointed. Well, it's kind of a funny story, but in January of 2008, Chapman, who's back there, my wife was pregnant with him, and she said, why don't you don't write on anything real controversial this month, because I just don't want you to be on the cover of the paper when we go into the hospital to have the baby. In case they don't like you, they might not be nice to me. I said, okay, that makes sense. So I was going to write on Roe v. Wade because it was January, the anniversary and stuff. I said, okay, I won't write on that. And to show God has a sense of humor, he had me write on something that we both were blind to see that it would be the biggest controversy of all time. But he had a purpose in it. He had a total purpose. And what I wrote the letter on was in 1992, when I had been in college, one of my dad's friends, who'd been a famous author in writing books about communism, the evils of communism, he called me and he said, Curtis, would you go to a meeting at the University of California, Berkeley for me? And I said, sure, what is it about? He goes, it's the Communist Party's having a meeting there. And he goes, I want to know what they're talking about. And again, remember that time, in 1989, the Berlin Wall had come down. And then in December of 91, the Soviet Union had dissolved. So this is 6 months later, the summer of 92, he goes, what's going on? Communism's dead. Why would they be having a meeting? We won. So I went to the meeting for him. And as I was there, it was 3 days of 12 hours a day, breakout sessions, all this stuff. A couple of things hit me. One is when I walked in, I thought it was going to be, since it was at the University of California, Berkeley, a radical place, I thought it's going to be all college radicals there. So I bought some T-shirt that said, we need a revolution or something, and whatever. I thought, oh, it's going to be a bunch of college guys or whatever. But I walked in the room, and it was all 50, 60, and 70-year-olds with briefcases, and there was about 1,400 of them in there. And I realized, okay, this is more serious than I thought it was. Well, over the weekend, here's what they explained. They laid out a plan, and this is what I wrote my letter on to the editor. They wrote on, they were discouraged what had happened in the Soviet Union, but they said, we're going to still keep moving in America to take America down from within, like we've been doing, but now we're going full bore at it. Here's our plan. We need to first destroy the family in America. And as you hear them talk about the family, this is how they described it. The family is the most evil institution ever created by man. It is to enslave women and brainwash children. That's the only point of the family. From their point of view, I'm like, well, what planet are you from? But they said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to continue to get behind the feminist movement and keep pushing it to make women discontent with marriage and motherhood, so they'll go out and have a career. And then we also want to work at the same time to get as many early learning programs as possible, pre-K if possible. We want the kids as early as possible to keep them away from the parents. We want the parents to have no influence over their own children. And so that was their plan for the family. They also said we need to destroy this free enterprise system in America. It's so unjust. Only the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And so now again, this is 1992. So it's 31 years ago from right now. And here's what they said, how they were going to destroy our free enterprise system. They said, we think the only thing we can do, get behind, that would create enough regulation and red tape to destroy people's ability to start businesses and prosper in America, is if we get behind the environmental movement. We go, that's the ticket to just drive business out of America and make it impossible to succeed. So the system will collapse and we can implement a socialist society. And then lastly, they said, we need to finally erase the last vestiges of the morality in America. Morality is man-made. It restricts man from doing whatever he wants to do. And we need to destroy that. And we think, again, 31 years ago, and this is the communists talking at the meeting, pounding on the pulpit like a pastor, sweating, just pounding on. We feel the only thing that will finally take morality off the table, where there's real no discussion about that anymore, because it doesn't relate to what we're doing, is if we can get Americans to accept homosexuality. That's what they said, that's the communists. So I wrote a letter talking about that, and I just said, here's what they said at the meeting. And then when I was writing this letter, it was 16 years after the meeting, and I said, my only comment on the whole letter was, here's what they said, and look where we are today, America. It's time to wake up. Well, needless to say, when we went into the hospital to have Chapman, I was on the front page of the paper, and had been for 8 days in a row. People were protesting at the Capitol, demanding I resign just because I stated what was at this meeting. They received more letters in response to mine than they ever had in their 100-year history. The paper told me that. And most of them were in favor of what I had said. And one man, he wrote a letter, and he said, what Representative Bauer says is true, but it is nothing new. It was all written in a book in 1958. And I called the man and became good friends with him. What was the book? He said, The Naked Communist by Cleon Skousen. And I got the book. And as I started to go through it, so I read, in the book, there's 45 current communist goals. Cleon Skousen had been an FBI agent, and he had gathered together all the data from all the FBI agents that had gone in undercover into the communist cells throughout America in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and said, what are they talking about? What are they trying to do to destroy us from within? And he said, he compiled it, he goes, here's the 45 main things they're talking about. So I read this for the first time 50 years later in 2008. I'm just going to read a few of them, because as a Christian, you will be concerned about what their goals were for us. And I was so stunned when I read these. I'm like, our enemy gave you their list of what they wanted to do to us, and we let them do it? What kind of fools would allow that? But this, again, think of 1950s America. And those that weren't alive then, think of Leave It to Beaver or whatever. It was a different world, completely different world back then. Here's some of the goals. You wonder what's going on in the school system. Goal 17, get control of the schools, use them as transmission belts for socialism, soften the curriculum. Dumb it down and teach socialist ideas like the good of the many outweigh the good of the few, and start to get them to think collectively so they'll think socialism is a great idea. Well, I don't know if you saw the poll from last summer, a poll of 40 and under in America, 70% said they want socialism. 70%, that's how successful they have been. Well, when 70% want socialism, guess what? You're going to get socialism because they're going to be the adults here real soon. Then, as a Christian, I read these things and I'm steaming because I go, communists understand the greatness of America is our morality. It's this book right here. That's what made America great and the only thing that made America great. And they understood it, but we don't seem to get it. Listen to some of these goals from 1950s America. Goal 24. Eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship and a violation of free speech and free press. Get an obscene culture, it just starts crumbling on itself. Does those things matter? Yes, they matter. God is holy, and we're supposed to be holy like God is. I remember one time when I was a kid in the early 70s, a rough guy that was, he had tattoos all over, which was so unusual back then. And he was just rough guy. I was waiting for my mother outside the store, and he was talking to another gentleman. This shows you how far we've come. He was talking on the other side of the door, and I'm just standing there, 7, 8 years old, waiting. And he used the word hell when he was talking to his friend. I'm sitting there. A minute or two later, I remember when he looked over and saw me, and I can still picture his face because it scared me. I didn't know what he was doing. He comes, walks over, puts his face in my face, and he said this, "Son, I'm so sorry for saying that. I didn't see you standing there." That's how far we've come. A rough character used the word hell. He said, he knew you don't do that in front of a child or a lady. Think where we've come. I'm just telling you, the ship has been sinking for a long time and people don't realize it. Listen to this goal, goal 25 from 1950s America. Break down the cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography in books, magazines, motion pictures, radio, and TV. You get a pornographic society, you get an immoral society. And when you have immorality, the families start falling apart. And then guess what happens? They raise the kids, which is the whole point of it. They want to raise the next generation because they know the saying is true. The hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. You ladies in here and you men that have children, the most powerful position in the world is a lady in her home with her children. You're raising the next generation, okay? It could be the next presidents or senators or doctors or missionaries or whatever. But they didn't want you to do that. They want to do that, so they want to mold the next generation. So they'll talk in, oh, don't waste your time with snot-nosed kids. Go be something. Go work for some man out there and do something with your life. I'm just telling you, it's lies, it's poison, because they had an agenda behind what they were doing. Pastor, this one, 27, 1950s America. Infiltrate the churches and replace revealed religion with social religion and discredit the Bible. They knew if it's just a do-gooder club where you meet to just have fun and feel good about yourself because, I went to church or I fed the poor or whatever, where you're trying to look good or feel good instead of do what is right and change the world with the truth in here, they knew that will neutralize our number one enemy, the church, and then we will be able to slip in and slowly take things over. And there's so many other ones there that are so important. And they've done all of them. And all of these goals were radical goals in 1950s America. 80% of men in America are addicted to pornography, and 40% of women. Just that one goal has destroyed our country. If you go to Walmart and you look at the women's magazines, Any of those in the 1950s America could be considered triple X pornography, and you would have gone to prison if you tried to distribute that. That's how far we've come. And we need to awaken from our sleep of thinking everything's fine. It's not going to be okay. If we keep going on the road that leads to destruction, one day we'll arrive and we'll be there. And the Christians are supposed to be the salt and the light. What does the salt do? It preserves. It preserves things. It makes sure, no, we're not moving the ancient landmarks like the Bible. We're not doing that. We're keeping it the way God had it done. We're not going to be all interested in the strange and new and the clever new ways of doing things. We want to do it the old ways because they work. And history has shown that they work. So anyway, that blew up. I read those goals. I was shocked. And then God started to burden my heart with, I need to let people know about these. But I thought, how do I do that? I'm living in Idaho, in rural Idaho, and I've got 5 friends, whatever. How do I do this? But I learned. I just started praying every day. Faith, God, what do you want me to do? I feel a burden to try to share this with our country so they understand what's happening. And months go by, and I thought, should it be a book? And I said, well, a lot of people don't read. It probably needs to be a film. But I didn't know anybody in film. And so just the way God does things, I got an email from a Christian organization in Texas that we were familiar with. And they were having this film academy, a 3-day film academy, kind of on the basics of making film, to teach Christians how to be involved in that. I thought, right when I read that, I thought, dear God, I think you want me to go to that. And I just sensed, yes, I want you to go to that, and I'll let you know while you're there if you're supposed to make a film about this. Now, my background is not film. I've never made a film in my life, don't know anything about it. But I had learned, again, if God wants you to do something, you just do it. And so I went to that. While I was there, I talked to all these young men they knew everything about everything. And I started asking, well, if I was to make a film, what camera would I get for this price range? And what type of software would I use? And I found all this stuff out. And while I was there, I just felt, okay, God wants us to make a film as a homeschool project. And I'm like, okay. And I came home from that and kind of gathered the family around. They knew that's why I had gone there. And I said, you know what? Our next project, we're going to make a film. And my wife's like, we are? Are you sure? And I said, yeah, I'm sure. I know God, that's what God wants us to do. So that night, and I love that this is another testimony of the faith God has given children. That night when we were saying prayers together as a family, Christian, who's the pilot who is not here this morning, he was 5 years old. And it came to his turn to pray. And he just heard his daddy say, he's going to make a film. I mean, I don't have a camera, I don't have a script, I don't have a clue. And he heard us talk about a month or so before of this big Christian conservative film festival in Texas. They had this big grand prize. And we had talked about it because we thought, isn't that great? Someone's encouraging people to make good, decent films. We were just like, oh, that's great. So he heard that, and then he heard his daddy say this, and it came to his turn to pray, and he said this exactly. Dear God, help Papa's film to win the festival. Now, I just told him, again, that, yeah, I think we're supposed to do this. Well, we laughed, and we went to bed. A couple days later, my daughter, Carolina, whose husband and some of her kids are here, she wasn't feeling well this morning. They live in this area, too. She came up to me, and she was 14 at the time, and she said, Daddy, why don't we fast and pray this Friday that your film does win that festival? I was like, well, that's a good thing to do. Okay, well, yeah, let's do that. I'm like, sweetie, I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm not even sure if I'll ever get this thing done. But we did, so we did that. We fasted and prayed, God, help our film we haven't started on and don't know how to make. Help it to win the largest single cash prize film festival in America. And so we did that. Another week went by. And I came down for breakfast, and Carolina was in charge of breakfasts, and there was no breakfast. And I said, Carolina, where's breakfast? She said, oh, Daddy, it's Friday. And I said, oh, are we going to fast this week too? She says, Daddy, we're fasting every week until it wins. So we started fasting every Friday. God, please help our film to win this festival. But we started working. I realized something. Okay, I don't know how to make a film, but God's asked me to do it. And here's a lesson in that too. If you have really given God control, and you're like, no, it's yours, you take the reins, He often will give you something you cannot do. Because He wants you to have something where you go, God, help me, I can't do this. He wants you to be pushed beyond what you're able, so He gets the glory, and you learn to rest on Him like you're supposed to, and you learn to just go, help me, Father, and just be with Him in the midst of, what do you want me to do? And so I realized that. But I also realized from learning this through wise men, when you don't know what you're doing, find someone who does know, and that's where you start. Like in the restaurants, and I had been in the restaurant businesses before. And this is just a key nugget of wisdom for you young people in here. If there's something like, I'd like to do this, and you don't know how to do this, you need to find someone that does know how to do this and go apprentice under them. But when I had wanted to get in the restaurant business, I realized I don't know enough to start a restaurant. So what do? I need to find someone that does. So we'd lived in Colorado Springs at the time. I drove all around the town until I found a restaurant that had a line out the door. And I knew that guy knows the restaurant business. And I went in there, sir, can I work for you? I'll do whatever you say, but I'd also like you to teach me the restaurant business because I can see that you know it very well. I'd like to start a restaurant someday. And so I'd learned that's a great way to do things. That's a wise way. He that walketh with wise men shall be wise, whatever the particular thing is. And my restaurants were very successful because of that man, not because of me. He gave me 30 years of restaurant experience in the couple years I worked there because he knew what he was doing. And so I learned that. So we didn't have access to any filmmakers, so we started watching good documentaries. Documentaries we'd watched before that were really like, man, that was great. I learned so much. And we started to become a student of film and all together as a family. And we're like, God, help us notice the things that we should notice to be able to be competent in this. And we'd watch them over and over again. I had hundreds of pages of notes of, oh, this is a key thing, always do that. And then sometimes we'd put in a documentary to watch, and in 5 minutes, we'd hit the eject button. And I'd say, why did we hit eject? Why did we hit the eject button? We don't want them ejecting our movie. And so we studied, and we did that. And then something wonderful also happened during this time. And this is a key for you men especially. I had always looked at my children as, oh, they're a blessing and everything, but they're kids, go do your things and stuff. And I hadn't really ever utilized them in my life to help me do the things God's given me to do. Like that's what they're there for. God wants the family to be working together as a unit, all together, which is a great light to the world, but to accomplish things. And I realized for the first time in my life, I need my family now. He's given me something I cannot do. I need help. And so that was the first time I realized, wow, He's given me helpers. I got 9 helpers. I didn't realize. And so my daughters who were 12 and 14, I bought them a video on here's how to set up lights for an interview. And I said, watch that 3 or 4 times and then show us how to set up these lights. And then we all started doing things together. We started filming things together of each other in different rooms, doing interviews to watch and to learn and to go, okay, what looks good, what doesn't. And finally, about day 30, it was really neat. We sat down that evening to watch the stuff we'd filmed that day, and it looked really good. And we're like, okay, we got it. That looked like the movie looked, that interview. So my wife started calling up all these people that had understood the times. They'd been studying what I just started to study for 50 years. And so many wise people God allowed me to meet with, and many of them are dead now. And they were just, it was such a learning experience. So we'd go there, and my kids would be with me, at California, at Stanford University, setting up the lights and stuff. They go, well, what's going on here? I'd like, it was a homeschool project, but we couldn't tell you that because you wouldn't have given us the interview. So, but anyway, so we got all these things. But as I was doing this, God kept encouraging me because He'd have someone in the interview say things that were just so powerful, so meaningful. Like, Oh, that was so good. And he just kept encouraging my heart. But we'd been working on it for a year. We'd finished the interviews and I started editing. It had been a full year. And it was January of 2009 now. And all of a sudden, I realized something. You know what? I've been diligently working on this the last month, but I haven't made any progress at all. And it was really scary because I didn't have a job. I was doing this full time, and our savings was going like this. And at that time, I had 8 children, and I realized, uh-oh, if I can't do this, I can't do this. And so I had confusion, but I didn't. It was a really serious moment where I said, okay, God, you asked me to do this. I know you did, but I don't think I'm capable of doing this. I'm doing my very best, and I'm getting some good little sections together and stuff, but it's not flowing into a story like a film is supposed to be. And so I told the kids and my wife, I said, I'm going to fast for a week, and I'd never done that before. And I need God to really give me some clear direction on how this thing is supposed to be put together. And I didn't even tell my wife or any of them. It was to the point, I'm like, if I don't get an answer in this week, I'm probably going to stop. Because it's not progressing. I'm just busy doing it, but it's just not working out. So I worked at home. My office was above the garage. And so each meal I'd come over and while the kids were eating and just talk to them while they were doing that. And then I'd go back and work. And each time I came over, they were all little at the time. They go, Daddy, did God tell you anything yet? And I'm like, no, not yet. And, day 1 went by, day 2, 3. Did he tell you anything? No, not yet. 4, 5, 6. I was still just foggy. I don't know what to do here. I knew God had asked me to do it, but I started to even question that. I go, maybe he didn't. Which is funny, when you get down and discouraged, sometimes you can, and don't do that. When you know God said something, you know he will be faithful. Well, anyway, it's day 7, and I told him a week earlier, Friday at 5 o'clock, I'm going to eat. I'm going to be really hungry, so we need to have a good meal. And it's Friday morning, and I almost stopped. I almost just gave up. I was like, it's just not going to happen. But I didn't. And I want to encourage you in that. When you're really down, you're discouraged, you don't know what's going on, go get on your knees and ask God, what's going on? What would you have me to do? What are you doing in my life? Whatever. And I went over to my office, and for several hours, I was on my knees going, God, help me, help me, help me. I'm trying to be obedient. I need your help. You have to help me. You have to help me, please, please, please. And it literally was 4:30, and the meal was at 5. That all of a sudden I got up off my knees and the clouds parted, the sky cleared. I instantly, it just became clear. I grabbed a pen, looking for paper, and started writing. Okay, first go through this, second go through this. He just made my thoughts so clear, and I wrote down, here's how the movie's supposed to be put together. And that's what it still took me another 8 months of editing to get it like that, but that's what the movie was. So I finished the movie the last day where I could FedEx it to that festival. And we'd still every Friday been fasting and praying, God, help our film to win this festival. And so we sent it in. It got there at the deadline. And a few more months were till the festival. And we went to the festival down in Texas from Idaho. And there was thousands of people there. It was a big festival. And they came to the last award of the night, the Best of Festival with a $101,000 grand prize check. And they called out our film, Agenda, Grinding America Down. And we went up there, and it was so special to see. We'd faithfully done our part, and God chose to bless in that way. And he doesn't always do that. But when we were leaving the stage after receiving the award, I said to my kids, I can't believe God would do this. And my daughter, Carolina, who had started us on the fasting, she said, Daddy, I knew the first day we prayed we were going to win. And I said, and that's why we did, because you had the faith to believe that. And I said, this is for you, that my kids, this is your award to always remember God is faithful. God answers prayer. And I'm telling you all that. Listen to me. I don't care if you're in Alabama or wherever, God is faithful. And he can use you right where he has planted you. But are you willing to be used? Are you willing to be different? Are you willing to say, you're the boss, I'm all in, what's the plan? And then are you really willing to submit if he says, okay, here's the plan. Quit your job and go do this or something. Oh, I'm going to lose my retirement. I'm just telling you, God is God. And too often we don't treat him like he's God. We're so thankful to be going to heaven one day, but we're going to hold on to what we got down here as long as we can. Don't do it. I'm just telling you. God blessed that film in so many different ways, which was just a blessing. And that's how we started singing together. I started getting invited to speak all over the country on what was happening in our country from a Christian perspective. And then, so I said, honey, why don't you teach the kids to sing so you guys can be part of what I'm doing? And we traveled for 10 years in a bus around the country doing that because that's what God had called us to do. But he's always been faithful, and because he can't be anything else. I just want you to know that. And he doesn't love me any more than he loves you. But I'm telling you this, I am so grateful that I only wasted 32 years of my life. And I finally said, you're the boss. And in closing, I want to read a psalm for you but just, I don't know, I hope this was a blessing. I know it's totally different than a normal type sermon, but it's important to hear testimonies of God's faithfulness. Because for you to remember that, yeah, he was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but he's also your God if you're saved. And he can do just for you what he did for them. He hasn't lost any power, any ability, and he has a plan. He knit you together inside your mother's womb for a specific purpose. Do you know what it is? Have you ever asked him? I just encourage you to if you haven't. I don't care if you're 85. If you give him the last couple of years of your life, that's okay. You will be so grateful on the day you die and you enter into eternity, you'll be, so glad. I finally gave him the reins before I came up here. You will. I promise you. I look back over my life. My life was about making money or whatever before that. And I like business things and stuff. But I look since then in the purposefulness he put into it. And just all the opportunities he's opened up to me. And I was just not the right person for it. He goes, I know, that's why I'm going to let you do it. So there's no one will be deceived and think you did it. They'll know you had help. I go, yeah, that's right. I did have help. I mean, just so many things. But God had us born for such a time as this. And there are serious times going on in our country. I know sometimes when you live, as we've just lived in this area for a year and a half, it's almost like all the things going on in the world aren't going on when you're here. It's like a little Mayberry where everything's fine. But we also need to be sobered by every day in the world, hundreds of Christians are executed just because they follow Jesus. Do you know that? Hundreds. Today, hundreds of Christians will be executed for no other reason except they're a follower of Jesus. Well, we need to carry some of those burdens with them and be praying for them. Our country is disintegrating. It just is. I don't want to shake you out of Mayberry, but it's not Mayberry out there anymore. We travel all over. I'm usually in 20, 25 states a year, and I'm just telling you, you see the collapse of the churches, of the families, of the structure, of law and order, of everything. And those are good days. But he said, these are the people I want here at that time. Oh, okay. So get on your knees and say, God, what would you have me to do? And just get more serious about it. As a Christian, heaven is the fun and games forever. This life's not that, although it's wonderful following him and you have the best life anyway. But I'm saying we can't get caught up like a lost man where we're thinking, I just want to have fun and make money and do. You can't have that be the whole focus because you'll realize on the day you die, I wasn't able to take any of it with me. What was the point of that? I piled all this stuff up and then I left. But I knew I was leaving. So why did I do that? And so it just to be thinking about life in those ways. And I hope this was a blessing in some way to just kind of pull you in to our life and to God's faithfulness to us. But we're just a family like any other family. And anyway, I want to close with this. In the Bible, Jesus is the vine and we are the branches. I know you're familiar with that picture. And any time you pull a branch off of a vine, what happens? Does it bear any fruit or leaves or anything? No. It just dies and shrivels up. Okay? He said, I am the vine, ye are the branch. He wants us abiding in him so we can bear much fruit, so we can use our little nothing, our little loaves and fishes to feed the 5,000. He can do that. You're like, oh, I don't have anything. That's great. I didn't either. But he doesn't need anything. He just needs whatever little nothing you have and say, it's yours. And he'll go, oh, that's all I needed. Everybody sit down. We're going to eat. He's the one that does that. And he loves doing that because then everyone realizes he's something, isn't he? Yeah, he sure is. Psalm 91 says this. If you're abiding in him, this is what you can expect. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in him will I trust. Surely he shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler and from the noisome pestilence. He shall cover thee with his feathers, and under his wings shalt thou trust. His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. Thou shalt not be afraid for the terror by night, nor the arrow that flieth by day, nor for the pestilence, like COVID, you won't be afraid of that walketh in darkness, nor for the destruction that wasteth at noonday. 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee. Only with thine eyes shalt thou behold and see the reward of the wicked. What's the reward of the wicked? Destruction. He said, you'll see that for them, but it won't be for you. Because thou hast made the Lord, which is my refuge, even the Most High, thy habitation. He's everything. He's just, you're dwelling in him. There shall no evil befall thee, neither shall any plague come nigh thy dwelling, for he shall give his angels charge over thee, to keep thee in all thy ways. They shall bear thee up in their hands, lest thou dash thy foot against a stone. Thou shalt tread upon the lion and adder, the young lion and the dragon shall thou trample under feet. And then it's so neat. Then it's God talking to King David. And just like he would talk to us. And he says this. And can he say this about you? Because he has set his love upon me, therefore will I deliver him. I will set him on high, because he hath known my name. He shall call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. With long life will I satisfy him and show him my salvation. That's who God is. And if you know him, that's what he should be to you. And you should strive to be like King David, a man after God's own heart, that is truly just having God be everything. And again, I just don't underestimate what God can do in Alabama with this church. Just don't underestimate it. God can do whatever he wants to do, and he likes doing the impossible. He likes doing the great things because it shows the world who he is. And so then when you share the gospel with neighbors and friends and family, and they see your life is different, they see what's going on is different, it all makes sense then. Because then they realize when you tell them about Jesus, he is different because I can see him in your life. You're not like everybody else. You're not following the same drumbeat as everybody else. You're living different, pure, innocent, holy lives, set apart, separate, where love is the dominant feature of who you are. And what's the most loving thing to do, unlike what our culture says? It's to share the truth with people. That's loving. It is not loving to tell someone that's on a road to hell, oh, you'll be fine, everything's great. That's what the world says love is. Just be tolerant of everybody. Just let them go about their own business. A Christian cannot do that. If you know a guy's speeding down a road where the bridge is out, you have to scream, stop, stop. Don't go, the bridge is out. You have to try at least. Maybe they don't listen, but you have to have tried to do that. And that's what it means to love your neighbor. But anyway, Pastor, thank you. I appreciate it. And I hope some nugget there, someday if I ever come back and talk on Proverbs or something. I love the book of Proverbs. But I just felt like, just since we didn't know you, that you would have more understand who we are as a family and everything. And maybe some of the things God did for us would be a blessing to encourage you and to just go for the gold for Jesus.
Well, Curtis, you said one thing that you said, well, I know this hasn't been your typical sermon, but it kind of has, right? Like y'all have kind of heard all that before, and when you started telling your story and you were saying you were becoming the state rep and you wrote the article and all, I wrote my wife and I slid it over. I said, I think I know this guy, and I've watched your documentaries. And I've got them in my office, and we've planned on showing them, to the church. So I told her, this is so, I said, this is so odd, but it's great. And so with that, thank y'all for coming and for being with us. And so if y'all will stand, we're going to close with an opportunity for any that want to make a profession of faith today, that y'all can, you can come forward and make that profession as Miss Mary Sue will lead us in a song.